So welcome to another episode of the Simply Verified Beef podcast. I'm your host, or one of the co-hosts, Bree Patterson from the West Coast, and today we are talking about remote drug delivery devices with Dr. Tamara Quaschnick with Zoetis. So welcome, Tamara. We're excited to jump into this topic today.
Thanks, Bree. I'm happy to be here today. And like you mentioned, I am a veterinarian. And when in that role, I wear a couple of different hats. I have worked both in clinical practice, and then I also work for a pharmaceutical company currently, Zoetis. And so with that perspective, have a little bit different insight into drug development and regulation surrounding particularly antimicrobial use, which I think is of key interest to our users. Professional realm, my husband and I are also cow-calf producers, so I think we can have a pretty balanced look at their use and how they may fit into a producer's operation.
Fabulous. And that's the great thing. We love having guests on our podcast that don't just come from a scientific background, but also from a producer background too. And if I remember correctly, you were a cattleman's young leader. Was that correct?
That's right. I was probably one of the extended classes, was a CYL in 2019, and we got kind of held over through COVID, and we were able to make a lot out of that program, and thankful for the connections that it has provided.
We always like to give a shout out to CYL because myself, my co-host Amy Higgins from New Brunswick are both CYL graduates from just before the pandemic hit. So we got to have a traditional or normal CYL year. But as you can see, Tamara comes from a very broad background. So I can't wait to dive into this topic. If you are ready, Tamara, I am ready.
Yeah, let's get after it.
Awesome. So when we talk about remote drug delivery devices, and we're going to call them RDDDs just for safety's sake, because it's a mouthful to come out in a podcast. But when we look at it from a verified beef production standpoint, we kind of look from the section 3 of the animal health section of our updated and brand new producer manuals, which can be found on the website. They're great, easy resources, but we look at it from a proper equipment standpoint and an administration standpoint. So we want to make sure that the equipment you're utilizing is proper and in good working order, and you're doing it as per veterinary recommendation. And you're not just going willy-nilly and chasing your cows with a dart gun for fun. So with that in mind, realizing that the Verified Beef program leans heavily on the NFAC, so National Farm Animal Care Council's codes of practice, and we have a lot of really intelligent beef scientists, veterinarians backing the Verified Beef program to help make stuff created for producers at a scientific and animal safe way. Let's dive into some topics or some questions we have curated and pick Dr. Tamara's brain on this. So, Tamara, in your opinion, how many producers utilize RDDDs? Did I say that enough D's right there? How many would you say?
I think you got the 3 D's in there, Bree. But I think that's certainly growing in popularity, especially when you look at how pasture dynamics are changing, or availability of pasture, and the number of places that are being rented out, or traditional pasture being broke up into farmland. So all of a sudden we have these places that our animals are grazing that don't have great facilities or any sort of handling facilities on them. And I think that would be the biggest reason, is that lack of facilities or lack of access to them is why people are looking to use an RDDD. And so with that said, I would say, about a third to a half of producers on the cow-calf level, I would suspect are or have used remote delivery devices.
I think that's a good point, that as agriculture shifts and changes across Canada and we start changing up the structure of our land space, that means we're putting more into crop, or we're going back to more native pasture lands, that we're going to start seeing the use of different technologies. And an RDDD is a type of technology. It might not be a computer software like we're used to, or our cell phones, but remote delivery devices are technology, and we might as well use all the technology we can at our fingertips. We need to make sure we're considering a few things. So are there any key considerations or rationales as to why you'd utilize an RDDD versus running animals through a squeeze, or say roping them and doing a traditional kind of cowboy doctoring?
Right. Like, I think we need to look at what our indications for use are. And I think one of the biggest or easiest ways to justify the use of remote drug delivery is if there's a public safety concern, right? This is when we're looking at like a rapid takedown of an animal, and we need effective restraint. So I think that's a pretty easy one used to justify. Another aspect to consider would be the welfare or stress on an animal. There's some situations where an animal is going to need to be treated, and if the alternative is moving them to a handling facility, and if they're painful and lame, we really need to consider what is fairest for the animal. And then also are located in relation to facilities. And then the skill and the operator's abilities, right? Who is actually available to either DDDs, or alternatively, who is able to effectively pasture treat an animal. And I think when we look at the roping and kind of cowboy way of doing things, unfortunately, I think that's becoming more and more of a lost art to be able to do that well and safely for both the animal and the horses and riders or cowboys there. So I think as we lose some of those skills, or it's just not safe to restrain an animal in that way, that's when we can start to see the use of, dart guns or the RDDDs. But as much of that they offer, or the advantage that they offer, they also open up some significant, liabilities or drawbacks that I think we'll drill down on in a bit. They are out there and they are a technology that is available, but like any other technology, go through an iterative process to become better. And I think we are becoming more aware of devices and what needs to be done so that they can be a more effective tool going forward.
Totally. And I think you touched on so many great aspects that we don't always consider about with remote drug delivery device, like the fact that if the animal is in an area where it could cause harm to humans or other animals, like maybe the animal is at large in a more urbanized area and it can't be roped and caught and stuff like that, maybe we do need to utilize it for tranquilization, and then the animal is at a safer handling facility. Or like you said, with the art of cowboying kind of transitioning depending on what part of the country you're in. In BC, we still do a lot of traditional cowboying, but other parts of the country do not. So obviously utilizing that technology where is appropriate and applicable is totally, like you said, it's technology. Let's use it for where we can, but let's make sure we're doing it safely and appropriately, not just for the animal, not just for the person or the horses or whatever else involved, but also from a consumer standpoint, because as much as it may be fun to visualize yourself as like out in the Amazon and blanking on, those old movies from the 90s, Indiana Jones and that kind of stuff with the dart gun, let's put that aside and imagine doing it in a healthy and humane fashion to help maximize animal health products in the animal that needs it, and then also making sure the animal does not get any more damage or the humans involved as well. And I think you also touched on the point where sometimes that animal can't be transported. So here's a little nice PSA to remember to have your TOC handy when you're transporting, and make sure you're up to on your knowledge of the new transportation regulations. So there's a little extra asterisks in this particular podcast. We're not going to talk about transport, but I think that's something we need to consider as well, because when we look at the transportation regulations, certain animals cannot hop on the truck and trailer and head into town. So being able to utilize various technologies is just a great way to keep that animal healthy and happy and safe, and as per veterinary recommendations. So we're going to jump in a bit more from, there was a study by Olds College students just recently completed for the Verified Beef Production Plus program. So thank you very much to those Olds College students. Hope you're listening. It was a great report. I really enjoyed looking through it. And from that report, I found a few things I thought we might want to talk about. So it was noted from this report that most producers don't have a lot of formal training on RDDDs. So Tamara, where could a producer go to receive that training?
Bree, that is a great question. And I think that is one of the biggest things that we're grappling with this right now, is that comes to mind, like that's top of mind for me, where I could send a producer to get formal training. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed. Maybe in circles, you have some awareness of some of these training programs, but in terms of, training at the veterinary level, we had a very limited amount of drug delivery discussions, and they were pretty much exclusively based around anesthesia. So kind of that capture kind of thing with more of an exotic bent to it, as opposed to what probably I'd say 95% of these devices are being used for in Canada. And so, yeah, like I'm interested to know what is out there, but I don't think it is a widespread phenomenon. And certainly there isn't requirement for it, right? Like any producer can go into where these devices are sold and pick them up. And so it becomes on the producer to figure out how to operate it correctly. And that doesn't always happen, right? Everybody's got demands on their time. And so oftentimes it's, oh gosh, we have this situation that has come up and we need to do this now. To put the question back to you, do you know of any training programs that are in existence for these devices?
That is a great question. I wish I could say I did. I was kind of hoping you would have the answer too. So I think this is a great point. And this is where, as much as we love to think that the verified beef production coordinator knows all the answers or a vet knows all the answers, we're all still actively learning and growing within the beef industry. We're trying to make this better for future generations, active generations, and all the animals that will come with it. So I think, reaching out to different professionals and networking within those professionals, if that means you reach out to your verified beef coordinator, and maybe some of the verified beef coordinators across Canada are familiar because they utilize RDDs and they can help the producer and kind of coach them a little bit. Maybe it means reaching out to your vet. Maybe that vet is really knowledgeable, or they know another vet who's really knowledgeable in their veterinary college colleagues. I think the important part is doing your research and reaching out to the appropriate professionals in the animal health world, because if they don't know how to do it, they'll probably know someone who does, and they can direct you that way. Because again, when we look at verified beef, this is a quality assurance program, and we want to make sure those animals are taken really good care of. And we also want to make sure that we are not causing issues like broken needles or damage to the meat, because obviously the meat is where our money comes from. Regardless if it's an old cow that's going to go become ground beef or a fresh calf that's going to make its way to the feedlot sector. So again, leaning on your animal health professionals, or those in the animal health, beef science, the nerdy people of the beef world, lean heavily on them, and they can help you direct you to who might be more of an expert on the topic.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect to consider with training is, our animal health professionals, right? Like looking at what veterinarians are mandated to do and standards of practice that they have. And I think it's a hot topic. I want to say probably contentious would be a more accurate word for the use of these devices. There's certainly some things that come along with their use. Like when you look by nature of the situations that you're using it in, it makes it hard to have an effective clinical or physical exam, right, to confirm your diagnosis. You're at a distance. So as much as technology has advanced, there's still a need to examine that animal up close. When we look at the conditions that we're often reaching for these devices for during the summertime, is often a lame animal or one with cloudy weeping eye, right? And when we look at lameness, sure, foot rot, an infectious condition, yeah, that is a common cause, but it's not the only thing that could cause lameness on pasture, right? So the use of these devices does make it hard to have that quality or diagnostic exam that we really should be striving for in these cases. There's a lot of animals that don't respond to those antibiotics when it's like, it's kind of our best educated guess. It could be. A foot abscess isn't going to respond to antimicrobial administration. And so then, in addition to the welfare thing of a delayed diagnosis or effective treatment, we also have to factor in antimicrobial stewardship. And that is where it starts to really become a big gray zone in their use, both by, what is actually being administered to the animal, what route is it ultimately ending up in, right? Like, sure, we have darts that are labeled, sub-Q versus IM, or, different needle lengths, but it's been my experience that it ultimately just ends up intra-cow, right? Like we have this IC route. So then, there's just this whole web of factors that get really knotted up in a hurry. So it's one of those things that I think, we can just dart her, is easier said than done. So to come back full circle, like, yes, we can have training that helps with operation and, practice to help with operator skill. Still going to be concerns that we need to address that come along with device use. If that long-winded discourse makes sense, right? So yes, training, and whether it is a regulated aspect or, part of the program where if you are going to use these devices that you've shown that you are proficient in the use of them, or more self-directed just to make sure that you're doing a good job and that you're taking a shot that you can make, and that things are all lined up. And sometimes, and I would often suspect that more often than not, according to the standards that they should be used at.
Totally. And I think you touched on so many great aspects. The fact that you should be trained, and that's a big part of the Verified Beef program, is making sure you have proper training and by trained personnel. I also think it's a gentle reminder that not everything is treated with a shot of penicillin. As much as we'd like to think we give a shot of penicillin and the cow will magically be great, you're so right. There's so many things that could make an animal lame. Is it foot rot? Did the animal step in a hole the wrong way and just twist a muscle? Is it like a pinched nerve? What else is causing it to be there that a dart gun is unfortunately not maybe going to fix? It might look like the shiny thing to choose and be like, we'll just dart gun this animal. All is good, but without, like you said, doing proper analysis of the animal and taking a thorough inspection of it up close in person, it is really hard to make a final decision on what the end goal may be, right? Again, unfortunately, penicillin does not cure everything. Regardless of what the cowboys in the back 40 may tell you, there are certain medical conditions the animal may accidentally come through that cannot be fixed by that magical shot of penicillin. Great drug, does the trick when it needs to at the appropriate places for all those that need to utilize it, but just not for everything.
To jump in there, that you mentioned penicillin, the other thing that the use of these devices really starts to lean towards is the use of low volume drugs, right? Like the darts can only hold so much. And then also you're not going to get or hit that animal with multiple darts. Usually by the second one, they're starting to be pretty wise to things.
Yeah.
Right. So there starts to be this requirement for low volume drugs. But then when we look at our decision-making tree for use of antimicrobials, there are important antimicrobials that would be the best first choice for these different conditions, say pink eye or foot rot, if that's in fact what you're dealing with. But because they're a higher volume drug, like you're looking at, 45 to 60 mils for a mature cow, you're not going to get to be able to dart that cow 6 times, right? And so when they're starting to reach for these RDDDs, we start reaching for these lower volume drugs like the macrolides, right? So we have like tolaframycin, so, Draxin, or off-label use of Zuprevo or some of these other macrolides, just because they're a lower volume drug, which doesn't quite jive with microbial use. Yes, they fit in the dart, and you're only going to have to use like one of the 10 mil darts or like a 10 and a 5, but we've traded off in terms of antimicrobial stewardship. And I think that is something that we can't be cavalier about, right? And we really need to justify the use of these lower volume drugs. And so it shouldn't be necessarily the first thing that we reach for because of that antimicrobial stewardship aspect.
Totally. And I can just, like what you mentioned, having to utilize multiple darts, that cow is going to get smart. She's going to get tired and rangy, and she's going to peace out real fast. And regardless if you're on horseback, foot, quad, or truck, she will find a way to get away from you. So being strategic with when you use it for what particular medication and the particular dosage of that medication is key. And like you said, we need to be good stewards of antimicrobial resistance because we don't want to see any more resistance than there already is. And obviously antibiotics are not just used in cattle, but they're used in all kinds of mammals out there, humans included. So we want to make sure we're living in a healthy antimicrobial world. So I think that's a really key point. And another little asterisk to this particular podcast and a gentle reminder, antimicrobial, guys. So that was great. I really do appreciate that. What are some of the best management practices to consider from a vet's perspective? We've probably touched on a lot of them already, but if there's anything else that you can think of that if you were meeting a first generation rancher who was coming to you, it's like, Dr. Tamara, I really want to use RDDDs. What would be some of the things you would tell that producer so they can make sure they're taking the very best care of their cow? And obviously, I know you'll give them a verified beef plug and be like, go take the training, go do that. But what else would you do?
Right. Like, encourage them to have a portable handling system or corral system so they could set something up in the corner of every pasture. But short of that, I think letting them know that acquired and practice skill to be able to operate these well, and I guess to feel okay that they don't have that skill, they can seek out someone else who is good at delivering medications with these devices, right? Like, I love working with producers. We're producers ourselves, but we are independent. We're going to be self-taught, right? And we're going to get the job done, right? And so we have these situations that can devolve quite quickly, right? Like you start off with the best of intentions when you set out to treat the animal, and yeah, your first dart can be right in the neck triangle, right where you're wanting to go, and then the wheels can literally come off. So these are our considerations. You need to practice. You need to get the right size so you have that selection. Far too often, I get the phone call, right? Like, oh gosh, we need to treat this, but I just have 10 mil darts. I don't the 5 mil dart. She only needs 15 mils. Like what can I put in the dart as a solution or a diluent to get that volume up to 10 mils? Well, that's when we start to get into kind of veterinary compounding, or essentially adulterating that drug. Veterinarian, I'm not a pharmacochemist, right? Like we understand how the drug as it was designed works. We know what dosage fired then. We know how it behaves in the tissue. We know how long it lasts. We know which concentrations it reaches in the animal and what it's likely to be effective against. When we start getting into those conversations of like, okay, like, well, can we just add more sterile water, or can we add saline? Maybe, right? We can take some educated guesses, but bottom line is that we truly don't know what effects that has on the drug when we do that. Looking at doing that, we can't hardly justify compounding the drug in that way when the simple solution would be to have the right size darts available, right? So have a selection, invest so that you have the appropriate equipment to do the job correctly. And then also discuss with that producer the value of a correct diagnosis and using the treatments correctly. And not using response to treatment as a confirmation of diagnosis, right? There's a lot of times like, oh, I gave her a shot of that, and within a week she was better. Well, was she going to get better on her own? Was a tincture of time, was like you said, was it a step in a hole type of injury, or did she have a small toe abscess that punctured on its own and is now draining? Right? Like we just have those things to consider. So using it correctly, having the appropriate equipment, and being sure of what we're treating, right? Like I think we just need to consider that with discernment, not just be like, oh, well, we'll give it a try and see what that does, right? Like this is a plug for my profession, that diagnosis, both for the welfare of the animal and for the appropriate use of antimicrobials.
Totally. And I think like that goes back to verified beef. We always say you need to have a VCPR, so a vet client patient relationship. So this is a great reason to, if you don't have your VCPR for whatever weird reason, maybe there's not many vets in your area and all that kind of jazz. But if you think you're going to do an RDDD, make sure you have a solid VCPR so you can lean on your vet's knowledge and expertise and their particular connection in their community within their animal health network. I think you really covered that well. Like, this is not a baling twine fix. This is something you need to be very skilled at if you're going to utilize it. Make sure you've got the appropriate equipment that makes sense as per the dose of the particular product you're using. Make sure you don't become a chemist, which we stress quite often in verified beef. It's fun to play chemistry, but please don't. Please follow the veterinary script and work with the professional. So I think we've done a great job of summarizing RDDDs. Is there anything else you'd like to let the producer know before we sign off for today's episode?
Yeah, I think similar, like I'm going to draw a parallel with hunting. I think you need to be diligent when you're using these and have discernment. And really it comes down to, taking shots you can make. And then I think just being aware of the limitations. Like there's certainly work out there that shows even used as per manufacturer's recommendations, there's a certain amount of inaccuracy and failure of darts to discharge. So do things correctly and commit to that. And then also, we didn't touch on it too much, but I think we do need to be good stewards of dart recovery, right? Like making sure that if that dart hasn't, we need to know, right? Like animal that we check and see that it actually fully discharged. So we know what amount of drug made it into the animal. It also allows us to see if there is a potential for a broken needle. Like you can see what remains of the dart. I think those are the key things. Take the shots you can make and work to recover those darts, because there's a lot of important information that we learn from the recovery of those devices. I was always, in my English class, my high school teacher, she was like, you can't just introduce something new at the end of an essay. But I think that dart recovery is an important aspect to keep in mind as well.
Totally. I think that's a great way to remind producers gently that it's great to have a good aim, good shot, utilizing the correct pieces of equipment. If that's a 5cc dart versus a 10cc dart, to make sure you're getting your 15 cc's, you're not playing chemist, is to make sure you retrieve the dart so that you can, like you said, make sure there's no broken needle, make sure that the actual product made its way into the animal and it's not just hanging out on the grass and you just fed the grass some sort of drug, because that's not going to be helpful for anyone. And that's kind of a waste of money for all those involved. So I think you did a fabulous job of talking about RDDs today. So thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us today and getting people excited to remember that this is a great piece of technology, but do your research. Make sure you've got your animal health professionals in your back pocket to help you with this. Make sure you're following the directions and make sure you're just doing the best you can for your animals, and the consumer will be happy, the animal will be happy, and your bank book will be happy as well. So thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us. And until next time, that was Simply Verified Beef Podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors again, since without them, we couldn't have this fabulous show for you guys to tune into.
So thank you to the Canadian Agricultural Partnership through New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. See you next month.
Catch you guys later.